They're not trying to disguise themselves as planes. They are using our understanding of planes as a message, as a conceptual language. This is catastrophic disclosure. Welcome to the very beginning of an unbelievable time in human history. So there's been buzz for a while that the 2017 New York Times article marked the beginning of a 10-year disclosure process. The way that I understand it is at that point, there was a choice in disclosure modalities, right? Controlled or catastrophic. For some time, it did seem like we were going to go the route of controlled disclosure, where the government gradually disseminated what it knows, being very deliberate with the spread of information in ways that would not shake up the economy or cause ontological shock. And in fact, this controlled disclosure process, it traces back decades. As it's clear, the government has been ceding select information to Hollywood. The idea was to boil the frog, where the people are the frog. They would plant some ideas about NHI in film and TV and have those ideas boil into the collective mindset of humanity. All of this was done in the face of manufactured stigma at the same time, which in itself was very effective in making experiencers and believers look like conspiracy theorists, which is also a manufactured term in itself, keeping more conventional thinkers disinterested. And it worked well. In 2017, we had that New York Times article, right? And then guys like Lou Elizondo and David Fravor came onto the scene. And all of this was controlled disclosure in action. In the last couple of years, we saw the Schumer Amendment doing much more direct legwork in defining terms and saying without saying that there was non-human technology recovered from the crashes, recovered by the government and given to private industry in order to keep that tech out of public reach. But the Schumer Amendment didn't pass, and its second iteration, it was gutted. Let's zoom out a bit. Why is disclosure even a thing? Why should the government have to spill the beans one way or another? You could argue that to have this existential knowledge, our understanding of our place in the universe, that it's the right of all humans and that it should not belong to any government. And that's a principled answer, and I agree with it. But I find very little in history that demonstrates the government's adherence to a principle like that. They like stability, at least locally, and they don't want to shake the snow globe. What I'm saying is we can infer that disclosure is not a choice. It's clear that something else is driving this process. The government was given an opportunity, and it seems to me that the end of the Schumer Amendment was also the end of the attempt at controlled disclosure. So what is catastrophic disclosure? It's probably easy to think of like an Independence Day type situation, right, where the motherships come in and they cause a catastrophe. But the term doesn't relay the intent of the others. It just means the opposite of controlled disclosure. Uncontrolled disclosure, you could say. Or more specifically, uncontrolled by humans. Let's work backwards. If disclosure is a process that ends with all of humanity learning something about our place in the universe, from what could that arise? What would be universally convincing, especially in 2024? An article wouldn't be convincing. A video wouldn't be convincing, especially with like the ubiquity of Gen AI. A speech or a document wouldn't be convincing. The only thing that would be convincing, I believe, is something that anyone and everyone can witness firsthand. That would necessarily mean something global, something where anyone can go outside and see it directly for themselves and not have a choice but to think anything else. Does that sound familiar? Catastrophic disclosure is a process. It's not an event, and we're at the very beginning. I don't know if it's going to be a linear process where sightings expand to different locations around the world. Maybe there'll be a lull. If, as is rumored, if we're on a 10-year timeline, disclosure will be fully disclosed by December 2027. There's plenty of time for spells of nothing or something to happen. Let's talk about the things that are happening now. We have reports of drone sightings increasing and spreading around the country and the world. National media is thankfully starting to pick up the story and ask questions. The Pentagon claims to know nothing. Government officials are struggling to wrap their heads around it. Common sense says that it's obvious that the government knows more than they're letting on. But we can also logically deduce that, right? Because we were in the midst of controlled disclosure until we weren't. So let's review the facts. UAP have been breaching restricted airspace with impunity, including 2 Royal Air Force sites in England. They've been most prominently seen in New Jersey and New York. but there are reports from all around the world, and it does appear to be spreading across the US further. If this was China or Russia, it would be an act of war. There's also been no footage of them landing or taking off, and nor have any been shot down, at least officially. Many of them appear to resemble planes, including the nav lights and the engine noise, but many are silent. And with that, there's a discrepancy, right? There's a discrepancy with their altitude. If they are planes and they are 100 or 200 feet in the air, they should be a lot louder. Additionally, there's a discrepancy with their lights. FAA rules state that aircraft operating at night have to have a steady red light on the left wingtip and a steady green light on the right wingtip, and a steady white tail light. These are positional lights. They also have to have anti-collision lights, and the rules for those vary between aircraft, but I've put the guidelines on the screen. If you review the drone footage from the last week, it's clear that these rules are not met. They're close, but they're not quite right. It feels uncanny valley to me. What we're seeing is a forced perspective, right? It's a plane, or what looks like a plane, that is at an altitude of 1,500 or 2,000 feet, but in reality, it's at 150 to 200 feet. And to think otherwise is to deny reality, is to suggest that the entire state of New Jersey forgot how planes behave. Among the hundreds of videos out there, there are definitely some that are like actually planes, right? And within the discussion online, there are many, many people that are scoffing at the idea that these are anything but planes. And this tells us that there are many actors with many agendas at play here. Adamant suggestions that they are planes can come from people with good intent who are not aware of the history of the phenomenon, but I actually think that most of them have malicious intent, meaning the sentiment is artificial. This will come as absolutely no surprise to anyone who's ever talked about this topic on Reddit. In my estimation, 80 to 90% of comments in the UFO and adjacent subreddits are artificial. And that's because astroturfing is insanely cheap and insanely effective. For years, aggressive assholes on Reddit have been driving people away who were genuinely interested and new to the topic. These bad actors muddy the water by posting videos that are clearly balloons, for example, and then mass dismissing genuine videos as balloons. The purpose is to create confusion and disinterest in the topic. And it works. Now they're muddying the water by mass commenting that these things are obviously planes, and anyone who thinks otherwise is insane. Because of that, it's very easy for someone to go into a thread for a video, see a couple of dismissive comments, and then decide that it's bullshit. It's also really easy for well-meaning skeptics to latch on to this and spread the same thoughts. But now that there's an abundance of footage, it's becoming increasingly harder to deny the reality of it, right? So I think that this means that their strategy of attack is going to shift from they're not UAPs to the UAPs are hostile. Some of this actually popped up on Reddit last night, where a drone was reportedly shooting lasers from sky to ground. And in fact, this was a military helicopter exercise that had been announced weeks prior. But to find that second bit of information, you had to dig. And the disinformation campaign operates around the idea that people are lazy, they knee-jerk, and they don't like to dig. Let's talk about this one clip that I used in my last video. It's from Orange County, California. And I got a bunch of comments on various platforms saying that this was footage of a drone show from Knott's Berry Farm. Let's examine the claim. The drone shows that I found from Knott's Berry Farm were far more elaborate than what we're seeing in this clip. And moreover, nobody making the claim that it was from the drone show was able to link to whatever source video that it was clipped from. So is it possible that this actually was a drone show? Yes, of course it's possible. But let's look closer at what this appears to show. Drones going into the ocean. If disclosure is the process of revealing a non-human presence on this planet, my guess would be that the skies would come first, as we're seeing now, and the oceans would come second. Because we can claim to know what lights in the sky are, but if something intelligent is in the ocean, there's no covering that up. So it seems to me that bad actors are trying to get ahead of the connection to the water by selectively attacking certain clips. That's why it's important to trace the source, right? To tug the thread as far as it'll go. There can and will be red herrings along the way, but you have to keep in mind the big picture, right? What the totality of the evidence is saying, and not necessarily what one video says. Similarly, there are reports of drones being shot down. I'm very hesitant to believe that anything that actually was shot down was one of these UAP. This would be basically as easy to stage as it is to flood social media with artificial sentiment, right? It's the IRL version of posting a video of balloons and calling it a UFO. There's also some video of like Iran attempting and failing to shoot down a UAP. I think this is far more representative of their capacity. Again, there's precedent here. Across history, there have been reports of things in the sky that mimic known technology or concepts. In my last video, I mentioned the Nuremberg event in 1561 and the airship in 1896 in California, and it's also captured in historical art. And now we're seeing the same thing. They're not trying to disguise themselves as planes. They are using our understanding of planes as a message, as a conceptual language. It's not a direct message, right? They're not flashing Morse code in their lights. It's closer to like how zookeepers dress up as pandas to interact with them and minimize their stress levels. It's not a perfect analogy, but I think you get the idea. So my take on this is that we should be excited. They have not shown us hostility. They have not shown us malevolence. We really don't know their intent, but it's safe to say that if they wanted to destroy us, we wouldn't stand a chance. So therefore, it's safe to infer that they don't want to destroy us. I suspect that the coming weeks and months will be incredibly interesting, and we will begin to see the unraveling of threads that have been knotted for many decades. You are alive at this unbelievable time for a reason, and it's to bear witness to a shift of human consciousness that may only happen once in the history of a species. This is the confluence of technology, knowledge, empathy, and humanity. It is an antithetical response to the horrible, unjust state of the world right now. This is a transition. It's an evolution of humans and of Earth. So lean in, trust your intuition, and enjoy the ride. Bye.